You'd probably check out TikTok to get a laugh, learn a new recipe, or catch up on the latest makeup trend. However, a bereaved mother uses the platform to raise awareness about a much more serious topic.
I was worried, especially talking about my daughter being pregnant and overdosing, that trolls, haters, they're going to let you have it. But I decided, you know what? If her story can save one life, it's worth it.
On this episode of Grieving Out Loud, Teresa Korean talks about her daughter's decades-long battle with substance use disorder, which eventually led to a deadly overdose while she was pregnant.
But I miss her. I miss the opportunity of never holding or meeting my grandson. Just 3 weeks before she passed, I saw him in the sonogram. So that was when I met him.
I'm journalist Angela Kennecke, your host of Grieving Out Loud. I started this podcast along with the charity Emily's Hope after my daughter Emily died from fentanyl poisoning. We hope by raising awareness about the nation's deadly drug epidemic, we can prevent future deaths and more broken hearts. So the first thing I want to say is that I am so sorry for the loss of your beautiful daughter, Heidi.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter as well.
Both of us are like shouting from the rooftops to try to end this problem, to try to create better understanding of addiction. And I think we have so much in common, you and I, unfortunately.
It's a club none of us want to be in, but we're forced to be in. And it's bigger than I even recognize. After losing Heidi, that's when I realized and I started raising awareness how big the problem is, how many families are impacted.
I want to start off by talking about just your family in general. I thought it was fascinating when I was doing a little research on you that you have 6 children.
Between my husband and I, yeah, we have 6.
What was it like having this big blended family?
It was awesome. It was awesome. You would think that it would be difficult, but because they were so young, they blended so well. Everybody was really close. Heidi was the princess of the bunch, but she was also my rebellious one. She learned to be tough from her brothers, and all 3 of my boys were extremely close to Heidi.
Heidi was a princess of the group, but she's also your oldest, so I often think Emily was my oldest, and she also started to rebel in ways I never expected. Like I was not prepared for that. Did you experience that same kind of thing? How old was Heidi?
Yes, I did. I know she struggled with her dad and I not being together. That was a battle for her growing up. And then she spent time back and forth between her father and I. So she went through the rebellious teenage, ditching school, doing, I don't want to say typical because I didn't have the same issues with my boys, but I know she tried drinking young and stuff, but it wasn't, I guess it should have been concerning for me.
I think it's really interesting because I had some of the same issues with my daughter, Emily. I'm divorced from her dad, so she was going back and forth and never really liked it that we weren't together. And she started rebelling and acting out and skipping school or staying out all night and trying marijuana at a pretty young age, like 15, 16 in there. And I was really worried. Were you worried?
Very, very. She ran away a couple times. She was put on probation and violated probation. And we got her counseling, and she spent a few weeks in the juvenile facility from violating probation. There were times I literally had to go look for her and turn her in. That was one of the hardest things for me. But I knew she was safe. And that was the most important thing to me.
I had similar experiences. I felt like I was just trying to rein my daughter in, and eventually the legal system was involved because she was running away and staying out all night. And it was just so hard. I mean, I never expected to have to deal with those things as a mom.
Yep.
And meanwhile, none of my other kids ever did anything like that.
Right.
So is it a personality trait? Do you think it's a hereditary? I mean, why were our oldest children girls like this, yet our other kids weren't?
Well, I like my 2 stepsons, they weren't rebellious like her, but they went through some things. And I do think that broken families has a bigger impact than we even realize on our children. Huge impact.
think a lot about that because my first marriage was very dysfunctional. And I wonder, would it have been better to stay in a dysfunctional relationship? Because that screws kids up too, right? Or to
Yes.
leave and try to build a new life. I mean, I'm remarried. I've been married or with my husband for 13 years and it's very stable, very normal.
Right.
So I don't know. And then it's hard not to take on that guilt because you didn't stay in the marriage, right? Did that
Right.
cause our girls to act the way they did and to become addicted?
I believe so. It's just,
Do you feel guilty about it?
I would say no because her father and it was not a good relationship. If we had, it just would have, I think it would have had the same outcome because it just would have been toxic. And so what she did experience is, even though she was back and forth, she felt love in both places. And at the same token, I was more the strict one and he was more laid back. And so
Yeah.
that was my big battle is we did not have the
Yeah.
same rules.
I had the same problem. And I think
Yeah.
that confuses kids. So I think that maybe that's where the problem is really rooted, right? Because if they
Mhm.
come to your house and you expect one thing and you have rules in place and they go to the other parent's house and they can sort of do what they want and everything's
Yeah.
okay. And then they're getting conflicting messages. And then my daughter really rebelled against me because she wanted all that. What 16-year-old doesn't want all that freedom, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And if it's given to them, they're going to rebel against the one that won't, you know?
Right. I often say I really was the bad cop and I used tough love.
Yeah.
And I also think though about the 7 years of sleepless nights I had, which you probably
Yes.
had too, right?
Hmm.
It was
Yes.
exhausting.
Yes.
And you're trying everything. I mean, our stories are so parallel. It's really interesting to me because I drug Emily to counselor after counselor and tried to invoke the law, tried every tool that I could think of. And I even took parenting classes on oppositional defiant teenagers, you know?
Wow. I didn't
Yeah.
do that, but I should have.
Well, I don't know how much it helped. I learned, you can't punish for too long and just different tactics, different things that I employ. But eventually, after she turned 18 and left the house, I just kept loving her. There's nothing I could do to control her after that point anymore. Did you kind of experience that same kind of thing?
Yes. That's when our biggest struggle comes.
At 17, Teresa's daughter Heidi started to rebel in more serious ways. She moved in with her boyfriend and began using heroin. How did you find out?
She never came out and told me. I just felt it. But there was a time we were going camping. And at this point, she was 18 and she was staying with a boyfriend. I asked her if they could come watch our home while we were gone, just take care of our animals. But when we came back, there was literally a piece of paper on my desk that had different tools and the prices next to it. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then my husband started noticing tools were missing. They had stolen. And at that point, that's when everything came out. The issue was big. At that point, it was trying to figure out how I was even going to deal with this with her.
So what happened after that?
Well, I thought I was going to save her by just having a talk with her. Guarantee 100% I enabled her without even knowing it in the beginning. It was like, no, I was just trying it and I'm sorry. And so they did get a lot of the stuff back from Pond, which wasn't even important to me. It was what was going on causing that. And so I tried to kind of separate her from the boy, but that wasn't possible. Even if she was 16, 17, whatever, she would have found a way to do what she
Right.
wanted. And so it just excelled from there.
Heidi's relationship did not continue, but her drug use did. After she moved to Arizona to stay with her dad, she met a different man and got pregnant at 20.
And because she was battling with addiction, she decided to go into woman and children's rehab. So she went in there during her pregnancy, was doing great. We had great times when she was pregnant. I went to Arizona, visited her. I was there when after my granddaughter was born. But then she got out And once you complete the program, they help you into into an apartment. And Lacey's dad was actually in prison and he got out and she let him move in there, which at that point, everything just went down from there. She ended up getting kicked out. They stayed with his mom for 4 months. And then she reached out to me and wanted to come up here. I went against my better judgment because I didn't like him, but I wanted my daughter and my granddaughter close so I could make sure they were safe. So they came up for a little bit and then he ended up going back to Arizona. And before he went back to Arizona, she got pregnant again with my grandson. So the two kids have the same father. She was probably, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 months, and he went back to Arizona and has been in and out of prison, and he's never even met my grandson. And
So he really abandoned them.
Mhm. Yeah.
And her too.
At age 22, Heidi was now a single mom of 2 young kids struggling with substance use disorder.
She stayed with me and then she met this guy, and me being the protective mom, I'm like, hey, I got to meet him. And he was actually one of the most amazing guys that she dated. She ended up moving in with him, but her addiction got in the way and ended up back with me because he gave her an option. You know, you get clean or you can't stay here. We won't work.
I bet you were always hopeful, like, this is it. This
Yeah.
is recovery. I got my daughter back.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
tell me, what were your thoughts during those good times?
Thank God. Just like you said, I have my daughter back. But then the signs were there. The longer she was in her addiction, the more I could tell. And so the more she would avoid me because we actually had this communication that I didn't even have to say a word to her. I would look at her and she would say, what? You know, I'm clean. And I already knew. I didn't even have to have a whole conversation with her. But it got to the point where I recognized it, even on the phone with her. I could just recognize it. And so she would avoid me. She didn't want me to know because then I would push for rehab. And it was the same cycle for so long.
Years.
Very much.
How did this affect your entire family?
So for the longest time, when my daughter was running away and stuff in her teenage years, I actually used to hide it from my boys because I didn't want them to learn that and be like, oh, well, Heidi did it. So I protected them. And then as they got older and her addiction became a real problem, I talked to them. And honestly, I think because what they saw with her and what it did to her, what it did to me, they've seen her at her worst. There was one time I saw her at her worst and it was nodding out and she had a mixture, I think, of the meth and the heroin, but she was so bad and so skinny. My boys are not, they don't express as much verbally, but they're so protective of their mom. And then they want to protect their sister too.
Yeah. Yeah. Emily's appearance and her behavior and how it affected our entire family had a lifelong impact on her siblings, for sure. And
So
they are
much.
so protective of me now. And for a long time, they were angry with her for the way she was acting and what she was doing.
Yes.
And then there's some guilt after they die. They have some guilt because they were angry. They were like, what are you doing? Why do you look like this? Why do you act like this? It affects the whole family.
So much.
Heidi's substance use disorder not only affected her siblings and parents, but also her children. When Heidi started a new relationship with a different man, Quinn, her drug use escalated. Teresa became the primary caregiver of her grandchildren.
She was really strung out at that point. She just didn't care anymore. Before it was, okay, I'll stay here with the kids too. And it got to a point where I had the kids and she just was gone, and then she would just call up every now and then and want to come see them. That was the most difficult because she would come home. The kids think that she's there to stay, and then she's gone the next day.
Heartbreaking. Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The heartbreak continued when Heidi lost who she considered to be the love of her life. At age 30, Quinn died from drug overdose.
She was with him. I guess they had an argument. I am not really sure everything, but then she went and stayed with, a friend. Well, there was a cop in Lehigh who really tried to help my daughter get herself together. He really was amazing with her, and he knew both of them. And the night that he passed, he actually got the call and reached out and told my daughter that he overdosed. He had overdosed in his mom's basement, and mom found him.
Quinn's cause of death was a mixture of drugs, including lorazepam and heroin. Experts say when these two drugs are taken together, it is particularly dangerous.
Heidi used to tell me, I can't believe it because he always knew what not to do. He knew how to do it. And I said, nobody knows. Like, you can't say that you know how to not die.
That's the delusional thinking
Yeah.
of the brain, that they think that they won't be the ones to do that thing,
Exactly.
whatever it is. So was she affected by his death?
She was head over heels for Quinn. She was in love with Quinn. And then she just proceeded to go back and forth with her addiction.
Right. After Quinn died, you must have been really worried that was going to happen to her.
Extremely. I was actually the first person she called, and she was broken. And it wasn't just that, it was, she never healed from that. She never healed because she just, I don't know if she held on to an obsession, but she said she was in love with him.
Despite losing loved ones to drugs, Heidi continues to struggle herself with substance use disorder.
Heidi ended up going to jail. She got out. It was, I'm going to get into rehab. The problem with the rehab is she would reach out, but they wouldn't have a bed. And that was the biggest problem, because if they don't have a bed, then she's not waiting. She's not waiting. Right. And she stayed with me. And then she would look for an argument just to go do whatever she wanted. And I actually took her to a meeting. And we argued on the way there, because the thing with Heidi is when she would get out of jail or rehab, the first thing she wanted to do was get a job. But she needed to focus on her recovery. And I knew that her getting a job meant her having money to go use. And it always ended up that way. So I went back to pick her up and she was gone. She just took off, just with some stranger. And that was when I lost contact with her for a week or two. And then she would reach out and, she decided, I'm going into rehab. It was the continuous, I'm trying to get in rehab. I've called them. I've added my name to the list. And there were times where she did. She would even send me the email she sent. But then she stopped calling the rehabs and she just kept using. And then she would say, I want to come see the kids. And she'd come see the kids. It got to a point, and I will say this proudly, because I'm sorry to say proudly, but it got to a point where she would come over and leave, and the kids were so broken. And I was always trying to pick up the pieces that it became too much. So then she would call and say she was coming and not come. So one time she called and said, I want to come see the kids. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I said, you need to get clean. Your probation officer's looking for you. You have a warrant. I recommend you get in rehab. And at that point, it kind of kept her from coming around. She would call until she got arrested the last time. And that last time, she was ordered 6 months in jail for the first time ever. I had wrote the judge a letter, requested if you release her to rehab. Don't release her and then tell her to go to rehab because she won't go. So she got 6 months, did 4. He did order her to rehab, but released her. But she did go into rehab that time. She got into rehab, did her time into rehab. I believe it was 6 months, but that was where her kids could go. So it was women and children. So she had to transition in first. Then the kids went and she completed it. She did amazing. Then if she attended this church, they'll put her on housing. She did that. She got put on housing and she got an apartment in the recovery community.
So did you think that she was doing better?
I did. She was doing better. She was doing great.
At that time, Heidi was pregnant with her 3rd child. The child's father was also in recovery, and the two had met at a meeting.
I had no reason to be worried because she was doing everything right. And I had my daughter back. For the first time in many years, I had my daughter back. And she had her babies. I had no reason to be worried, but Father's Day weekend, something just didn't sit right with me. And so I had this feeling, this mom feeling, which I haven't had over the whole year. I chalked it up to maybe it's because she's pregnant, you know? And so the day before she passed, my husband and I went over and spent the day with her, and everything was so all over the place. It's the best way I can describe it. And that was the moment I felt like there was something not right. I asked Heidi if she was okay, and she's like, yeah, I'm just tired. And so we decided to go home later. I just remember she wanted me to stay. And this one thing about my daughter is when she would use, she didn't want me around. So that's why I was like, it didn't make sense. That's why I was like, no, I'm just being paranoid because Heidi wouldn't want me here if she was using. And she didn't sneak off anywhere, or she wasn't in a bathroom for an hour. It's just a feeling. We went to the store. She asked me to take her to get a money order for her rent. I took her and we were coming back and we got to the house and all of a sudden she's like, I can't find the money order. She left it at the store. And it's things like that. It just started like bothering me because she would do that a lot. But my daughter was also super ADD. She was already all over the place.
But she asked you to stay, but you had to go home, right? You're going to go home?
Yeah. Well, actually, what she said is, Nana's leaving. Like she was trying to make me feel bad. But then, she did. I think she wanted me to stay longer, but she was kind of like make me feel bad because I did. I had to go home and I had things to do. But I know she probably wanted me to stay. And that's something that I, just by her comments, that I struggle with.
In fact, that would be the last time Teresa would see her daughter. The following day, Teresa talked to Heidi on the phone about their upcoming 4th of July barbecue. Exciting plans that came to an end that night.
About 1:30, my dogs started barking. So I told my husband, what's wrong with the dogs? And so he got up to go check. And for some reason, I felt something in my gut. And I literally felt like there was a police officer at my door. Can't tell you how many times I had that happen with Heidi during her addiction. But she hadn't been using, so why would I feel that way? So as I got up to walk out, my husband walked up and said, there's an officer that wants to speak to you. And so I went down, and I can't tell you exactly the whole conversation. I think he asked if I was Heidi's mom. And I said, my exact words were, yeah, what did she do? And he said, can I come in and talk to you? And at that point, I'm still half asleep. And I'm like, well, can you just tell me what she did? And he asked one more time. And I said, okay. And so as I go to let him in, and I'm like, I said, is everything okay? And by the look on his face, I knew it wasn't. And that's when he told me that my daughter had passed away.
What did you later learn had happened?
Well, at that point, he said, because the kids were living with Heidi. And he said, we need you to go get your grandkids. So my husband and I jumped in the car and he drove me over there. And I wasn't getting 100% information at that point because honestly, I just wanted to get to my babies. I wanted to get them because they found her. My grandson is the one that found her.
Do they talk about that? Did they talk about it at the time?
We did talk about it. It's the one thing I can say is, and I don't know if you agree with this, but the loss of a child or a mother, I always say it's like a brain injury.
I do agree with that. I do agree.
After Heidi passed, I couldn't even think beyond the last year. I couldn't think about her addiction. It's a healing process. There's so much that I forgot. And so I did talk to my grandkids very gently at first to see what they knew.
And they were how old when she died?
4 and 6.
4 and 6. So if she's got a 4 and a 6-year-old there, and they find her.
My grandson, now he was the only one that could get up on the chair to unlock the door. So I guess Lacey was in the bed and he was in the living room and Heidi was in the bathroom. And he said that he went to go look for his mom and that she was in the bathroom. All I know is Heidi, the way she was sitting, that she was blocking the door, which gives me peace because I think that means I never did find out if he went in all the way. I don't think he was able to, but I know that whatever it was made him go to Lacey and wake her up and say, I think mommy's dead. And so he got on the couch and unlocked the door and they ran to Stephanie's house, who was actually with her earlier that night doing it.
And you later learned her cause of death?
Yeah, overdose.
Of
heroin and meth.
And so do you think that she, had gone back to using regular levels that she hadn't used because she'd been doing better for a while? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering, why did she overdose this time?
The fact that she had been clean for so long, I think there's a possibility that she did smoke it when I was concerned. And she maybe thought that she had built up to it. I can't even imagine because Heidi knew. She always told me, the dangerous part isn't when you're in full addiction, it's when you quit and pick up again. So she knew that.
It's so hard because here she is using while she's pregnant, which
Right.
is just so awful, right? None of us want to think that's ever going to happen.
Right.
And the baby dies too.
Right. I've had so many different scenarios in my head. I've had somebody say, God knew Heidi couldn't go by herself, so he gave her, the baby. I feel like God gave me 2, and then I don't want to say he took 2 because I don't mean that in a bad way. But that's what I feel like. He knew I needed Lacey and Kate, and they needed me, that we needed each other because we have always been really close.
You were their caretaker. I mean, you really were. You were the consistent one there for them. So how has the loss of their mom and going through all this, having her, not having her, then the loss of her, finding her, how has all of this impacted your grandkids?
There were a couple times we were going to put them in counseling, but because of how they lived with us more than they didn't. And so transitioning into our home was like it wasn't something they weren't familiar with. And so I think that made it easier. And sadly, they tell me all the time, we've spent more time with you than our own mom. And that breaks my heart because that is a sad truth. They had a very short time of knowing her, 4 and 6 years. Take away all the times that she was away and in rehab or, in jail. And so I was told, don't open wounds unless necessary. And so my grandson went through an anger stage really bad. My granddaughter, she'll talk about it, but she doesn't talk about it. And now she's 10 years old and she's going to start, this is where she's going to miss her mom. This is where he's going to miss his mom when she has her first relationship, when she graduates, when they get married, when amazing things happen, when they have a bad day. Those are the moments.
But they have you.
Yeah. They have us. Yeah.
You're among the millions of grandparents raising grandchildren because of this horrible drug epidemic. You're not alone.
Sadly, no.
Is it hard? Are you tired?
When I hit 50, yeah, but they keep me young and they're good kids.
Is it nice to have a couple of pieces of her left behind on this planet? Because I don't have that with my daughter. I didn't want her to have a baby at 21, especially in the state she was in.
Right,
But
right.
I often think I'll never have that grandchild.
Right. They are a blessing. And they've taught me strength, as much as I'm sure I've been strength for them, especially after losing Heidi. Heidi and it was her and I against the family. We were random. We were annoying. We annoyed the boys. It was just who we were. We were two peas in a pod, and I miss her. She was my best friend. And I thank her every day for raising Kaden, but I miss her. I miss the opportunity of never holding or meeting my grandson. Just 3 weeks before she passed, I saw him in the sonogram. So that was when I met him.
Devastating. That's what comes to mind. Devastating. All of it for so many people. For you, for the rest of your family, for her kids, everybody. It's just devastating. What's helped you cope the most?
Time. The first year, all I wanted to do was visit her and be with her. I felt like that's where I needed to be. Each year to me is different. Then last year I turned 50 and Heidi and I used to joke about how I was going to be 50 and she was going to be 30. And so I struggled with that one. I struggled with when she turned 30. That was really hard, but time is the only healing, and live for today because tomorrow isn't promised. And I hold on to Lacey and Caden and my boys. Oh my God, I would be lost without my boys. They have been the biggest support, and they're all mama boys. And I just am so grateful for them. They're amazing with the kids. They love Lacey and Caden, and they would do anything for them. As my husband, I would be lost without my husband's support. But as a family, we do it together.
And then there's TikTok. So let's talk about that. When did you get on TikTok, and what are you trying to do there?
2 years ago. I have a friend that's on there, and her story is a whole different thing, but I talked to her about it. And I was worried, especially talking about my daughter being pregnant and overdosing, that trolls, haters, they're going to let you have it. But I decided, you know what? If her story can save one life, it's worth it. And so I started sharing, and it's amazing the support I've got, the relationships that I built and the recovery community, people that are struggling. It's bigger than what I ever imagined. A bigger problem, a lot of families struggling. I've had so many reach out to me talking about how Heidi's story has saved them from picking up. It's amazing.
Do you feel like you're finding purpose in your pain and in your loss?
It's helped me heal. It really has. Sharing her story. At first, I really struggled with that. And now I'm able to share more. And like I said, at first, it's like your brain shuts down. And so now I'm starting to open up different areas of her life and her addiction. And it's a big healing process, as I'm sure you feel doing your segments and stuff. So
yeah, the whole charity and all the work I do now is all directed toward trying to help other people to try to prevent this kind of thing from happening to other families.
I love it. I love it, but I'm so sorry that we are here having to have this conversation for this reason. But maybe our purpose is to help others.
And I think we mothers, especially moms and grandmoms, have to band together to change hearts and minds and to change what we're doing and how we're doing it in this country to save lives. It's ridiculous how out of hand this is.
Yep.
I agree. So thank you for all you're doing too.
Thank you too. And thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me for this latest episode of Grieving Out Loud. You can listen to more episodes and read my blogs on our website, emilyshope.charity. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage.